Gurrein, you ready?
Yes.
Your client is a pharmaceutical company that is ready to launch a new drug. It is a drug for severe asthma. It is essentially the same as what is in the market today, but it is stronger, faster, and can treat severe cases that are not properly treated with today's medicine. The drug is seen as a breakthrough. The client is planning to launch this drug in Canada. They're coming to you to determine how they should price the drug. What would you need to explore to determine a good price?
Great. So I just want to make sure I captured all the facts. Our client is a pharma company, and our company has made a new drug that treats severe asthma. This new drug is similar to drugs already existing in the market. However, it's more potent, so it has stronger, faster results, and it's effective against severe cases of asthma. And so the company views this drug as a breakthrough, and they want to launch it in the market. So they've come to us to ask how should they price this drug and what factors they should consider to determine its price. Did I get everything?
That's right.
Great. So just a couple quick questions. Where is this company based? Where are they looking to launch this drug?
Looking to launch in Canada, and you can assume they're based there too.
Okay. All right. Okay. And is there a timeline when they're planning on launching this product? Is it like in the next 6 months, or are they going to take a little more time, or is it immediate?
As soon as possible.
Okay. As soon as possible. And is the company based in Canada, or is it based outside Canada?
You can assume they're based in Canada.
I see. So they're manufacturing it in Canada, and they're also planning on selling it just in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I might have more questions later on, but that's all I have for now. I'm going to take a few moments to structure my thoughts, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Great. Okay. So I have a couple ideas that I think are worth exploring. So three right now, I have 3 buckets that I would like to go into. So the first is, in order to determine the pricing, I think it's important to estimate how much of the drug do we expect to sell. So basically calculating the volume. And so for that, we have to basically size the market in Canada that asthma patients who would be willing to invest in this drug. So we could either get that from, there are already current drugs in the market, so that would give us a sense of how many customers we would be able to target. Within those customers, there would probably be a segmentation: those that have mild asthmatic symptoms, those that have stronger symptoms. The ones that have stronger will be able to wear them away towards our product quicker. I would also like to understand what the frequency of using this drug might be. Like, do consumers have to use this once a month, once every 6 months, and so on. So understanding the frequency, and then also figuring out how we're going to distribute this. So, if this is a large pharmaceutical company that already has a presence in the Canadian market, then it might be easier to promote this new product versus coming up with new distribution channels, or just building awareness about the company and the product from the ground up. The other thing is looking into the costs. Obviously, that's important when we're figuring out the price. So looking at fixed costs and then looking at variable costs. So within fixed costs, the equipment that they're using to manufacture this drug, was this already pre-installed equipment, and then they just had to add like other components? So what is the cost of manufacturing this drug? And then again, like I think any sort of marketing things that might come irrespective of how much volume of the drug that we're producing. And then within variable costs, looking at just the cost of the raw materials, any labor costs. Obviously, there would be scientists involved in creating this drug. So, what are the costs associated with that? Any other sort of variable costs. So just to summarize, 3 factors. So determining what the market size is, what is the volume of the drug, how much we expect to be able to sell, and then looking into the fixed and the variable costs. So I think what I would be most interested in exploring first is understanding what the market size is and how much we expect to sell.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good place to start. So to answer some of your questions, you can assume that the current asthma drug in Canada that our client sells is $5 per bottle. And that bottle lasts for 2 months. All right. So like you said, let's figure out what the total market size is per year in Canada for this drug. So how would you like to begin that?
So sorry, I'm just going to repeat the facts. So each asthma bottle, it's sold as a bottle, is $5 and it lasts for 2 months. And we just want to calculate what the market size is in Canada for one single year. So I don't know the population of Canada. I'm assuming it's a little less than the US. So US is about 300 million. So I don't know, maybe Canada is 250 million or 200 million. I don't know what, if you have a preference in the assumption that I use over here.
It's a lot less than the US. Let's just say 30 million.
Oh, okay. That was way off. Sorry. Excuse my ignorance. Okay. So in order to calculate the market size, I already have this total population. I would need to understand how much of that population is asthmatic, so either has mild or severe symptoms. And then from that population, I would know the total. So assuming one person uses one bottle and that bottle isn't shared amongst individuals, so that population size would give me the number of bottles that are used. And if a bottle lasts every 2 months, so that means 12 divided by 2, so 6 times they're replenishing it. So that would be multiplied by 6. And then I would just have to multiply it by the cost per bottle, and that would give me the number. Okay, yep. So what I need to know to do this calculation is what percentage of the 30 million population I should assume has asthma.
Just off the top of your head, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm from India, so I know pollution is a big issue in India. So if this is India, I would probably think like 40 or 50%. But in Canada, I don't know, maybe 20% of the population.
Good guess. I mean, let's just say 5. Be conservative.
Oh, okay. All right. I am overshooting with numbers today. So okay. 5% of. Yeah, so that's 5% of 30 million is 1.5 million. So basically now I have my target population. So this is a number of asthmatic patients.
Yeah.
Times number of bottles per patient times price per bottle. So number of asthmatic patients is 1.5 million. The number of bottles per patient, so every 2 months, 1 bottle. So in 12 months, 6 bottles. So that's 1.5 times 6 times the price per bottle, which is $5. So that's 1.5 times 30. That's 45 million. 45 million. So the total market size is 45 million for this drug. And I'm assuming that our company is not going to capture all of the 1.5 million asthmatic patients. So do we have any data on the industry trend? Like what is the segmentation like? Are there already dominant players? How does our industry stand compared to them?
Yeah. That's a good way to go. So before we go there, what do you think about the $45 million market size? Does it seem like a lot, little?
I wouldn't say it's negligible. I think there is a real potential over here. But again, to make a good assessment, I would also have to understand what the costs are. And again, I think the costs would give me a better sense of whether this is something they should be excited about.
Yeah, makes sense. So before we go into how much they can capture, like you mentioned, we know that Canada has a single payer system. All right.
Okay.
So assume for simplicity's sake, the government will pay for the drug for those that need it. All right. So can you brainstorm for me, what are some ways that you would suggest our client negotiates a higher drug price from the government?
I see. So the facts over here that I need to know is that Canada has a single payer system. And so what that means is that for every patient, so each of these 1.5 million individuals that we have, the government will pay for the drug. And so now we have to negotiate with the government to make sure that our drug is priced to our advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let me just take a couple moments to think about this. Yeah, so just 3 things that I've been able to come up with off the bat are, I think there would be like some sort of convincing involved in which we really show them the data about the quality of the product. So you'd mentioned early on that this is really a breakthrough drug in which people with severe asthma also it alleviates their symptoms. So I think really emphasizing the value that the product brings to patients is of importance. And maybe that will help, just the hard data will help convince the government that this is worth the price that we ask. Then I'm thinking, I don't know, like if there are other products that this pharmaceutical company makes. And so if, there's some product that we've had in the market for 10 years, we've made a lot of profits from that. If there's something for that, we can like maybe lower the price for that. The government is also going to buy that drug that we have. So perhaps like looking at other adjacent products that we have and considering like whether we can lower profits for that in order to keep prices for this. And then I don't know if there's some sort of multi-year negotiation that we can make with the government. Like suppose we do have to compromise on the price. If we can get into a contract in which we're assured that like our drug is maybe like gets a certain sort of spot in the market and continues for several years.
That makes sense. That's a good list. What else can you think of?
I'm just going to go back to my structure over here. I guess the other thing that comes to me is that if we could also get government support in reducing our costs. So whether that's if the government is concerned with the absolute price that they have to pay, then we could still keep our profit margins similar if our costs are reduced. So I don't know if like there are some policies the government makes that would help reduce costs of raw materials or our supply chain networks, distribution channels. So that's another thing. The government could also help increase overall volume. Typically, when volume increases, then price tends to fall. So if we capture a large share of the 1.5 million customers, asthmatic patients, then with the government's help, if like they sort of help us with the branding and promotion of this, perhaps that would also help drive our price down, which would be suitable for the government, but then it would also help in terms of our overall revenue.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay, so earlier you mentioned how much of the market would our client be able to capture?
Yes. Yeah.
So after doing market research, the client is considering 3 different price points for the bottles.
Okay.
Those 3 price points are $10, $15, and $20. At $10, the client anticipates 50% of existing customers will switch to their drug. At $15, they anticipate 30%, and at $20, they anticipate 15%.
Okay.
So purely based off revenues, which price makes the most sense?
Okay. So I'm just going to again make sure I got all that information. Our company has come up with 3 different price structures. The first is a $10 per bottle. So right now the bottle is priced at $5. This is just like a generic bottle for asthmatic patients. So we're considering to sell our product at $10, and so that would be 50% will switch to our product, $15, 30% customers will switch, $20, 15% will switch. Did I get those numbers right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I need to calculate the revenue for each of these associated with each of these costs. And so revenue is just price times volume. So I'm just going to go through each price and then calculate the associated volume for it. So for a $10 price, 50% of customers will switch. So 50% of 1.5 million is 7.5 million, I think. So $10 times.
I think you mean 750,000, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Times, So 750K. So that's $7.5 million would be our revenue if we use the $10 pricing strategy.
So let's think about that. So okay. You got the correct number of patients, right? So how much?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got it. So sorry, it's $10 per bottle, but we're not selling one bottle.
Right.
We're selling 6 bottles. So I just have to multiply this by 6, so that should be above 42, 30, 45. So actually that's exactly 45 million.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. All right. So then for the second, $15 times 6. 15 times 6 is the total per customer cost. And so from 1.5 million, we will draw 30% customers. So that is 15 times 6 is 90. Oh, sorry, 15 times 6 is 80.4.5 divided by 10. I think this is 36 million. Is that right?
No, you're doing the $15 price point, right?
Yeah. Yes,
no.
The $15. Okay, so sorry, I think I might have screwed up on the math. So $15 times 6 is 80. 80, and then we're looking at 30% of 1.5 million customers, right? And so I get 80 times 4.5 divided by 10, 4,500. Oh, still getting 36 million.
So let's back up. So you did 15 times 6, right? And then that times 450K.
I didn't calculate the 250K. I just did 3/10 of 1.5 million.
So what'd you get for 15 times 6?
80.
It should be 90, right?
6 times 5. Whoops. Sorry, 90. Yeah. 90 times 45. 9, 45, 36, 40. So this is 40.5 million. Yeah, 40.5 million?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Okay, sorry, that took me long. For the third pricing strategy, I have $20 times 6, that's $120. times 15% of 1.5 million. So that's $27 million.
That's right.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to put this all together in my head. So for the first pricing strategy, which is $10, in which we attract 50% customers, our total revenue is $45 million. For the second, at $15, our total revenue is $40.5 million. And then for the third, at $20 pricing strategy, our revenue is $27 million. So just going by absolute numbers, I think the first option, pricing of $10, is best, and also we're capturing like a large amount of patients, so that's 50%. So I would suggest that our company goes with the first pricing strategy.
Great. So what's your recommendation to our client?
My recommendation to the client is that their product is very encouraging in terms of its impact, and that the Canadian market for an asthmatic drug is substantial, 45 million, and they can also, if they use the right pricing strategy, they can attract that level of revenue also. And since this is a single payer system, the company will probably have to explore if the government will be okay with its $10 pricing strategy. And in case it's not, then there are a couple of things that the company can explore, whether it's in terms of really convincing the government officials in terms of the quality of the product just through their raw data, given how impactful this drug is, and then also like consider other sort of adjacent products or that they can potentially use to offset any sort of reductions in profits for this product, and then also maybe get into some sort of contract with the government where again we can consider the $10 pricing. But overall, a $10 price for this asthmatic drug seems good for capturing a large amount of the market.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're all done. Any initial thoughts before I go into feedback?
No, it's 15 times 6. I said 90, and then I don't know why I kept saying 80. So sorry about the silly math error.
No, it's all right. It happens. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one more thing. So usually I know when we are coming up with our structure, and after we've come up with it and describe it, it's usually recommended that you sort of go in a horizontal way and you describe all your 3 buckets first, and then you go into each of those factors. So I didn't do that. I think it was just nerves, and I just went into volume without telling you what the other 2 factors were. So if I had to do it again, I would change that. Mm-hmm. And then also in terms of your question on how should the company negotiate for a higher drug price with the government, mm-hmm. I think my the things that I suggested were a little weak, but that could be. I'm still developing my business understanding. So in the future, I would like to improve, like when companies are negotiating with the X party, then what are the different things that they should do?
Yeah, no, those are 2 great call outs. And I have those in my notes here as well. So, starting from the top, your recap, I thought it was good. Feel free to continue to push on making it your own. Like in 100% your own words. Don't be afraid to speak it back in the cadence and flow that you normally use in regular conversation. Next we went to clarifying questions. So clarifying questions, this was something I struggled with a lot when I was preparing for interviews. There's a framework that I used to think of clarifying questions because it's a very odd thing. You don't want to ask for too much data. You don't want to just like jump right in and ask for too little. You want to make sure you hit the right balance. So in general, you shouldn't really be asking more than 3 approximately. if you find that you're asking a ton more than that, then you're asking the wrong things or you're going into too much detail. I thought yours were generally good. One little one you asked about the location, where they were selling, and that was said in the prompt. So just be careful with stuff like that. Like Canada was talked about in the prompt. But the framework for clarifying questions that I usually use is one, understand how the client, makes their money, right? And so that doesn't always have to be framed as, like how do they make money or what do they sell? It can be framed as an assumption, right? So when you think of a pharmaceutical company, you can say, okay, I think of, Pfizer, they have multiple drugs and, they're used to doing this, and then I say either like yes or no. And then that way, you have a good idea of what the company actually is. The second is their goal, right? Like, what are they looking to do? Like, what are you driving toward in the case? That's crucial because, especially like in the actual job, there's a million different ways you could go in any case. The only thing that really guides you is what the end goal is and making sure you're marching towards something as the case goes on. And then the third clarifying question can pretty much be anything that you need clarification on. That differs case by case, right? So that's kind of like the framework I use to think of clarifying questions. And, there's some leeway depending on the case, but that's generally how I think about it. After that, we went into the framework. Your timing was pretty good. It was just a tad long, maybe just by like 15 seconds. It was just a little bit over the 2.5 minute mark. But, I know this is probably your 7th live case, so I'm not worried about the timing, whatsoever. I think you'll be totally fine on that. You're right in mentioning calling out the 3 buckets first, because the way I have your framework written here, I missed the transition between like market size and volume. Right. And so, that's really important, especially in the virtual world, because you want to paint the picture in the interviewer's mind that your framework is structured. Right. You don't want to take that chance that they think, you're not going about it in a structured way. That being said, the content of your framework, it was robust. Like you talk through a lot of detail, which is really good. I'm sure by now everyone on the call has heard the term MISI before, right? So, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. There's, in my opinion, too much emphasis on the first two, the mutually exclusive piece, right? And so like people focus on, having their buckets being, independent and no overlap. But the thing that really makes the biggest difference, like the mutually exclusive piece, that's table stakes. Right. Like you learn that and then you keep doing your framework. But a lot of people don't focus on the collectively exhaustive piece. And so getting down to a granular level of insight and making the framework really tailored to the problem happens in the content there. And you did a good job of that. I think there were just a couple things that I would have added. So I think, things like regulation is a really big piece here. Right. Like, it's, you're manufacturing a drug and, a prescription drug at that. So you need to have a really good understanding of, the regulation, maybe how that could change over time, any, pending legislation, recent legislation, and then another thing that could have been good to mention was, what's the lifetime of this patent? Like in the US, we have a certain way of, you hold the patent for, I think it's, 20 years and then, generics come into the market. How are they thinking about that? Or how does that kind of guide their pricing decision? While they're the only ones, presumably, that can make this drug. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay.
Yeah, I think regulatory is big. I'm in biology, so I understand the importance of that. And I missed it.
Yeah. I mean, all good. I mean, like I said, I thought your framework was robust. I'm looking through to see if there's anything else I would add, one other thing, and this is, a little bit, nitpicky, but one thing I like to add, especially in cases like this, are any, not competing asthma drugs, but any, replacement therapies, right? So like anything that someone may, if they're not choosing between this drug and then, 3 other competitors, are there any other options outside of that realm that could be considered, or that the client should be aware of? But that's probably the last thing I would mention on that. After that, your first step after the framework, going into the market sizing exercise, was really good. Very, very logical. You were very clear about it, stated really well. I want to say, your general demeanor throughout the case was excellent. I don't want, it's not all about the skills, right? I mean, when they're interviewing you, they're definitely seeing if, they would like to be, working with you for however many hours a day or whatever it may be. And so your general demeanor, it was, very, seemed very comfortable, very friendly. It was really good throughout the whole case, even during, the math mistake or two that was made. So I really want to highlight that because that's hugely, hugely important. The other great thing you did when we moved to the first math piece is you framed up what you wanted to do before diving in. You talked clearly about how you would estimate the market for this asthma drug in Canada itself. And it doesn't matter that, you didn't, I don't know if 30 million is the right population for Canada, just said it in the case. So it doesn't matter that, you guessed, whatever it was that you guessed. It was all very logical. You structured the problem really well, all that sort of stuff. So that was a really, really good job. And it was good having that initial opinion on the population of Canada. You didn't just kind of say well, what is it? You made a guess. And not only that, you backed it up with some reasoning, right? I would have liked to have done that on the, without being prompted on the asthmatic portion, because I asked, what do you think? What do you think the rate is of asthma in Canada? if you had just gone from, I think the population of Canada is X, and then go into the asthmatic piece, I'm basing it on, I thought the call to India was great. If you had gone through that flu, that would have been perfect. That would have been absolutely perfect. But all in all, you did really well on that. I would work on, talking through the math a little bit. There were a couple silences there that were just a tad too long. And it was when you were doing calculations. It feels very odd to talk through math calculations. It was something that I struggled with mightily. But even just giving context to the interviewer about, what you're multiplying and what you get and stuff like that. It also helps guard against some mistakes occasionally. Because the interviewer can kind of catch if, you're off by 0 or something along those lines. Finally, on the first math piece, it's important to always have an opinion on, the answers you get in the work you do. So, when you got the $45 million size of the market, it's okay to have, an opinion about that. That's part of being, kind of hypothesis driven. Right? You can say oh, it feels big, it feels small. It doesn't really matter if you're right or wrong. It's just your gut reaction to it, and that's something they expect on the job as well, is for you to always have an opinion on your work. It being accurate, you go to prove that later, but just knowing that you have formulated some sort of thought and critical thinking around what you got. After that, we moved into the brainstorm. I've got to say this was a really tough brainstorm. It was really, really difficult. But with brainstorms, you want to be as structured as possible, right? So generally you bucket into 2 buckets, structuring the brainstorm is more like checking a box, right? What you name your buckets in your brainstorm is not going to be evaluated as heavily as what you say in the brainstorm. So in this particular case, the example they have here is bucketing into, cost saving and life saving, right? So on the cost saving side, you could save the government money by having a drug that's so much more effective than what's, currently in the market. On the life saving side, there are, people who unfortunately die from asthma attacks, and hopefully this drug can help save lives. Those are 2 great, reasons to ask for a higher price, right? So, the way to go about the brainstorm is to say, I'm thinking about this in 2 ways, name the first bucket, name the second bucket, and then go back and fill in those buckets. You want to have kind of 3 to 4 creative ideas in each bucket if possible. I'm just looking back at my notes to see if there's anything else. You said some really good things there, like the like multi-year negotiation was excellent. One thing towards the end, and this usually happens, when you ask someone, what else, because that's kind of like anxiety inducing, a lot of people make mistakes after you ask that. But you mentioned volume, which isn't a bad thing to mention. But in relation to volume, you mentioned actually a lower price, talking about decreasing the price when the question was about how to increase it. Right. Now, what your caveat around revenue wasn't bad, but I would have maybe if you could think of something else, I would have said something else. But I would have called out that caveat first to make it known to the interviewer that like, hey, this isn't exactly like what you're asking, but it can be a consideration. Any questions about brainstorm?
No, I haven't thought about brainstorming so far in structured buckets. I've only thought of that in terms of the initial framework that we set out. So that's very useful to know.
Yeah. And also, when it comes to the brainstorm, like I said, this was a tough one. And so the structure here was difficult, cost saving and life saving. And that's just one way to do it. But also don't be afraid, to use like a very kind of like, internal, external type of framework in a brainstorm. The most important thing is that you get to very creative ideas, right? That's the time when you can really add value to your case because you can say something that the interviewer's never heard before. And that's a good way to make an impression. You can only be so fast on the math and there's a right answer to math. So, there's not a ton of upside there. It's more downside. So, because you can make mistakes, but with brainstorming, there's so much upside there. So, it's a very, very important piece of the case that is also sometimes overlooked. And then we moved into the second step of the math. And it seems like you have good organization because you were able to recall the numbers from the previous math section like pretty easily. So organization is a big thing when you're, writing it down and all that. Like I want to emphasize, organize the math. Normally it can be organized in tables, but you never know when you're going to have to recall something. One thing is, be very be confident in your math answers. If you feel like, they're not right, take another second or two to double check. But, when you got the first answer, which was 45 million for the $10 price point, you framed the 45 million like as a question, and so, but you were right the whole time, so, be confident in your math answers. If that's like a point of contention, then, take the extra time you need, whether, and normally it's only a couple seconds to really feel comfortable in what you're saying. I like that you were getting exact numbers. I would not round ever unless you're prompted by the interviewer, because some interviewers look at that as taking shortcuts. What you can do is say, ballpark, it'll be this figure, but I'll get the exact answer. That's when they can tell you can round or something, but I wouldn't assume that you can round. And then, after that, we got into the recommendation. Overall, you had all the good components. You want your recommendation to be, very confident and succinct. And so I think about the recommendation in 4 pieces. The first is the decision, right? Like what's the answer to the question? In this case, it would be, the client should enter the market at $10 price point, for their new asthma drug. Second is the support for it. $45 million potential if they get 50% of the current, asthmatic customers. And then you want to go into risks. You mentioned some good risks, while you were going through it. And then you want to finish out with next steps. All right. You want to go through those 4 things, succinctly, confidently. And, you don't want your recommendation to ramble on because quite frankly, 99% of the time, by the time you get to the recommendation, they've seen enough to make a judgment on your candidacy. So you don't want to draw it out any longer than it needs to be. But overall, good job. Really good job.
Thank you for taking me through it. I was extremely nervous.
It's all right. Yeah, you did good.